Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the news that was splashed all over the Sunday papers yesterday. Now, don't worry, Andrew, it's not about you. Don't sweat it. Oh, wait, you can't. No, this is about the announcement that face masks will once again be mandated in schools. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So in this video, what I really want to do is ask the question, in my roundabout way, why do the government not apply sensible measures against COVID infection in schools and colleges? Now, for those who don't know, I was a teacher before taking up shouting at the internet full time. I even carried on part-time teaching for quite a while, until last summer in fact. I was very glad to not be going back into the classroom in September. It was always going to be carnage. Throughout the pandemic, schools and colleges have been deliberately thrown to the wolves. They have been the government's petri dish on herd immunity, which we now know cannot exist. As someone who spends most of his time analysing British politics, I must confess, you could often be at a bit of a loss to explain why this was. I have hypotheses which I'm going to go over, but I don't quite know. I understand that the Conservatives have this pathological fear of small squares of fabric. They have an equally serious terror of not having people listen to their rubbish. So I get that they have this irrational fear of face masks and will come up with all sorts of absolute crap in order to avoid wearing them. Jacob Rees-Mogg said he didn't need to wear a face mask because he was a jolly fellow and therefore he was fine. Also remember when our health secretary, Sajid Javid, a man who you'd think would be a little bit more serious, said that it was impossible for Tory MPs to catch COVID from one another because they knew each other. The guy running our pandemic response day to day thinks that you can only become infected from strangers. But it's been an odd feeling this last week. Like ordinarily, I'd have been getting ready to go back to work tomorrow. I mean, I am still working tomorrow, as I've worked almost every day this Christmas. But going back into the classroom, maybe one of those crap training days first, where you make a chair out of balloons and then they run out of time to test it, so some bugger else wins even though mine was best. Yes, that happened. Yes, I'm still bitter. But the point is that I still feel like that. Not upset about the chair balloon. My body's getting ready for something different this week. I keep getting that feeling that I'm getting ready for a burst ahead of the week's work ahead. But next week is not going to be any different for me than last week was. But you tell my brain that. But for teachers around the country, that is what's happening to them. Last term was already a bloodbath. All right, ministers saying that, keeping schools open really important. Yes, but they weren't. There were loads of staff and kids at home due to the way that the government let the virus sweep through. With the original form of the virus, ministers tried to excuse it and said, but kids don't catch COVID. It was a load of crap then, but they were just less likely to become ill. So they were hidden in the stats. But vulnerable teachers and other staff still became infected, and the profession is now badly hit with long COVID. Not as badly as health and social care, of course. Then the government announced face masks for the general public in shops and similar settings. Far too late, but it came eventually. But not schools. There was some guidance, and my classes wore them anyway. There was a brief period when face masks then were mandated in the classroom. No two ways about it, you've got to wear it. Not just in the corridors, in the actual classrooms, which is where it was most needed anyway. But even that didn't last long. It's a matter of weeks, really. Absolute madness. Wearing face masks is the single simplest thing you can do. It doesn't prevent you carrying out any activities. You can enjoy your full freedoms if you wish. Maybe reduce the number of orgies you attend, maybe. Just wear a bit of fabric across your face, preferably at least FFP2 masks, but anything is better than nothing. I mean, I've worn all sorts over the time. Now consider a school or college. You've got a load of young people jammed into a relatively small room for an hour at a time, maybe more, before they then move on to another room to do the same all day. Unlike with the original form of the virus, it has long been understood that the variants that overtook it can rip through a population of young people very easily. There was no hiding that in the stats. Now, had I still been in the classroom, I'd have been taking in a couple of air purifiers at my own expense. I've known other teachers that are doing the same. But in general, you don't find these because the government couldn't be bothered. This is despite the fact that their own advisors told them it would be an inexpensive way to have a big impact. We know from hospital wards that have used them, it has a big impact. And this is why I struggle to get the politics. Like, there is a reason. There's always a reason. But does it make sense for the Conservatives to want an out-of-control pandemic? I get that they quite like the pandemic because it's letting them raid the country's wealth for themselves and their mates and keep their country on an emergency footing. The public often give their political leaders way more leeway than they should during national emergencies, rally round the flag and all that. But how is it in their interest to have the massively out-of-control situation that ignoring schools in pandemic measures inevitably leads to? Why not tell people in schools to wear face masks? Why haven't we had this from the start? Why haven't we had it throughout? It's all right bringing it in now. Mark my words, in a few weeks it'll be gone again. You know, I mean, they do this to Tory voters in the shops. Why not to non-Tory voting populations in schools? And why not get proper ventilation into schools? Devolved administration's been working on this, so why didn't we do it throughout the UK? Wouldn't cost very much at all compared to the costs of dealing with the consequences of not doing so. But although the ventilation is not coming, in England at any rate, the face masks are, again, for some brief period, no doubt. So that's good, right? Well, yes and no. On the one hand, I breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness, I thought when I read it. But then I thought, but why are they doing it? Because they did this before, and then a few weeks later removed it again. They're not doing it because the government are now concerned about the rate of infection. Yes, when schools go back, they are going to drive that rate even higher. Of course they will, how could they not? But it has been climbing steeply throughout the past 2 weeks when schools have been closed for Christmas anyway. But what has been driving today's figures, it's not schools, but the general population's habits. Habits that are not going to be modified at all by the government. Also, they announced this measure on the Sunday, 2 days before schools return. That doesn't give people a lot of time to sort all this out, does it? I mean, sure, people should have had them anyway, but what if they don't have the face masks? And for those still banging on about Omicron being milder, the hospitalisations are now as bad as last year, when we had only just started the vaccine rollout and we were about to go into lockdown. Yes, it's causing fewer deaths, it seems, and there's a study suggesting it's less damaging to the lungs, which is probably linked, but it's still filling up our hospitals. As I've said before, the data still shows that you are just as likely to end up in hospital, but we've got way more people infected with Omicron. And that not only means that the victims are less likely to get the quality of care needed to avoid the tragic outcomes, but it impacts other conditions as well. Some A&E departments have already started to turn away everyone that doesn't have a life-threatening or critical condition. It's just, you go there, if your condition isn't serious, like really serious, they're having to turn you away. They don't have the staff to provide the care that they should be able to. And maybe that's part of the reason why the government wants to use schools to drive infection rates. It's long known that the Conservatives want to replace our NHS with an American-style, unregulated, free market system of private healthcare insurance. It's also known that their strategy is to badly underfund healthcare, point out that it keeps failing despite how much money they keep throwing in, but of course they're not throwing money in, they're throwing money to private companies, and eventually move to a position of saying, look, we've tried it, the public funding model just doesn't work, we need to privatise it. And it doesn't take any great wisdom to see this. You're not any great sage if you can see the Conservatives doing this. It's the same trick they pulled with rail, gas and water in the past. I mean, why change tactics when they've worked so well? Then I saw a report saying that the Prime Minister had asked ministers to plan for COVID workplace absences of up to 25%. I thought to myself, wasn't that what David Cameron and George Osborne did? Their excuse at the time was the global economic crash. Now they're doing the same thing, aren't they, to shrink the civil service? That's what this is. They're just trying to shrink the civil service. Call me cynical, but this sounds like the same thing. Because if you're asked to, right, you need to be able to manage things with 25% fewer staff, what you the obvious solution, of course, is to shrink the civil service down again, isn't it? So that then afterwards you go, oh, well, we managed to do with 25% fewer staff. Well, we don't need them. We might as well get rid of them. Reduce the size of the state. If you see the Conservatives regarding the pandemic as not only an opportunity to raid the nation's coffers, but also cut back on the size of government completely, remove public services and all the rest of it, then perhaps wanting to use schools as breeding grounds for the virus makes sense after all. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.